As we've seen so far in this chapter, there's more than one way to create layer transparency for use in compositing. Here, we will use the shot that we previously tackled with the RotoBrush tool, and instead, we'll use another method to achieve the same result by using a difference mat. With difference mats, we tell After Effects to look at one layer and compare it with another. Any place that's different will create transparency. So here in our shot, we have the same result, but this time in this foreground layer, layers 2 and 3, we're deriving transparency by a difference mat. So how do we use this? Let's start with this composition where it's a clean start, and layer 5 is our clean background plate. We're adding in our fire layers, and of course we need to bring back the guy in our foreground, so let's duplicate layer 5. We'll rename this foreground, FG, and put it just underneath the letterbox there. So now that we're starting from scratch, we need to talk about how we can use this difference mat. And the difference mat requires two things. First, the shot needs to be locked off, and so that no changes happen from anything. So the only difference here is that we have the guy running in the foreground, and we have a little bit of a focus pull, but by and large, the camera itself isn't moving. We have these guys down here, but we'll disregard that. The second thing that we need is that we need a clean background plate. So as this guy moves past the frame, here's a section from about 3 seconds on where the portion that we need is pretty much clean. So let's use that to our advantage. Let's go ahead and take this background layer and we'll duplicate that. And we'll call this freeze. Let's also come up here to layer, and under the time, we'll go to freeze frame. And it adds a time remap effect. And if we solo that, you'll see that indeed for the duration of our shot, that is a static image. It's this that we'll use as a reference. We'll come back here to layer 2, and under effects and presets, let's type in difference. And under the keying set of effects, we'll take our difference mat and add that to layer 2. And it's already creating some transparency, but let's see what's going on. Let's solo that. And everything is transparent. Why is that? Well, when you first add it in there, you're telling layer 2 to reference itself. The difference layer here is set to layer 2 itself. So instead, let's focus in on layer 6. And by doing that, we're now creating some transparency where After Effects sees what's different and creates a mat for that. Of course, it's a little ratty here and some areas need to be fine-tuned, but by and large, we're getting the effect that we're after. Let's go ahead and park right here and zoom in a little bit and focus in on the edges here. I'm going to come in with the matching tolerance and reset that back down to 0 so you can see what's happening here. As I hold down Command to click and drag on this value, I'm slowly increasing this matching tolerance and eating away at what's the same, and now starting to move and isolate into what's different about this layer compared to layer 6. So somewhere in here is pretty good. We're going to start to refine these edges here. You can certainly come in with matching softness and start to taper off some of the aliasing that's going on there. But as I'm doing that, you'll notice I'm starting to eat away at other edges here. So I'll worry about the gas can and the feet here in a second. Let's focus in on the arm and the edges here. You can certainly fine-tune this and get as far as the difference mat effect will allow, but we can give it a little bit of help by way of something called the matte choker effect. So under effects and presets, let's type in matte, and over here under the matte family of effects, we have matte choker. Let's click and drag that to the bottom of our stack, and just by adding with the default values, you see that already we're getting some really nice, much cleaner edges. So somewhere in here, we need to fine tune that a little bit. Let's go ahead and increase the choke. We might play with gray level softness. You can see how that starts to erode or eat away into the matte. And we have the matching tolerance, and we can drive this and just basically play back and forth and see to what degree we want these effects to eat into our foreground layer. So somewhere in there is looking pretty good. Now I need to bring back this detail here, of course, with the gas can and his feet. So to do that, let's go ahead and duplicate this background layer again. And we'll bring this up top, and we'll call this patch. And what I'll do now is just take layer 2 with it selected and come over with my rectangle tool and just click and drag, create a mask for this patch. And with this patch, I'm starting to get into this area here where the gas can is and all this other area that we want to keep. As we scrub through, you see that the rest of this needs to be masked out as well. So let's go ahead and grab our pen tool. I'm going to zoom out and grab all this area here that we need to bring back. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. We do have this area here what we need to refine. Looks like this mask area here, we're getting too far into it. That's okay. Because now what we can do is patch this even further. So let's go ahead and take this foreground and we'll create a brand new layer. And instead, we're going to mask out, let's solo this, the area where the feet are making contact with our horizon. So that's somewhere in this area here. And so what we'll do now is alter these difference matte settings to bring back more of the feet. Somewhere in there, we can alter with our matte choker a little bit. And so now we're bringing in just that detail for the horizon on a separate layer. So let's call this horizon. And when we look at this entire thing in context, we now have all the transparency we need to create this foreground transparency up at the front. So instead of rotoscoping with the pen tool and instead of using the roto brush tool, here we're using, oops, looks like we're getting a lot more transparency than we bargained for here. We need to import that horizon, and let's just take that matte and bring this all the way. Let's add in another keyframe here. We'll zoom in, select that one point, and bring this all into place. And all we're doing is just refining this matte a little bit so that we have all these effects working in tandem together. We'll get the rest of that horizon. Here we go. So that all together should play out pretty nicely. And we're able to do that with a couple clicks, a couple layers, and the use of the difference matte.